What's up, guys? It's Tico from SGN here with the third episode of the SGN podcast. We're going to be talking about the Champions League. We're going to be talking about the main event of UFC Wichita, which was featuring Junior Dos Santos and Derrick the Black Beast Lewis. And we're going to be talking about Captain Marvel. Now, let's go ahead and start off with the Champions League because the match has literally just ended, and I want to talk about them first because, it's fresh in my mind, and a lot of really interesting stuff has been happening in this Champions League. I'm going to go ahead and say it. This might be the most entertaining, or at least the most shocking, I guess you could say, Champions Leagues we've seen over the past 5, 6, maybe even up to 10 years. Like, if you look at the Champions League every single time the tournament starts, there's really, over the past 5, 6 years, there's really 4 teams that you expect to be at least in the semifinals, if not, of course, one of the 2. I mean, at least 2 of the 4 being in the final itself. It's Real Madrid, of course, the 13-time European champions, Barcelona, Juventus at this point, and Atletico Madrid. Those are the 4 teams that have consistently been in finals, or at least semifinals, over the past 5 to 6 years. Unfortunately for those, fans of those clubs, 2 of the 4 have already been knocked out. And it's not like they were knocked out by the biggest clubs, or at least, of course, Atletico Madrid was knocked out by Juventus, so there's really no shame there, except for the fact that they got hit by a monstrous comeback. But apart from that, there's really no shame in losing to arguably the favorites to win the whole tournament. As for Real Madrid, they lost against a very, very young and inexperienced Ajax team. Now, those players, like, for example, De Ligt, De Jong, the other De Jong as well, they all might move on to be great players. They probably should, because the amount of talent in that Ajax team is insane. But more than likely, they're going to all divide within the next couple years, and Ajax, as always, are going to kind of go back to having to develop young players and eventually maybe find a great bunch of youth players that are going to do great things before they all divide and go conquer Europe with a bunch of other teams. But as of right now, Real Madrid, of course, taking on this young Ajax team. Of course, they lost Cristiano Ronaldo, but you still expect that Real Madrid side with so many phenomenal players like Bale, like Benzema, Isco, Marcelo, Sergio Ramos, of course, one of the greatest leaders in football today. We're talking about players, of course, Luka Modric, you have to mention him, and Toni Kroos. We're talking about a team that from top to bottom, from the starting 11 to one of the deepest benches in the world, they're an absolutely huge club with phenomenal players. So you expect them to go against a team like Ajax and maybe struggle the first match. Of course, they struggled the first match in Amsterdam, so there's no shame in that, I guess you could say. It's never easy to go against a team like that with so much energy, with so much, I guess you just desire to beat a team like Real Madrid. But then at the Bernabeu, you kind of expect them to go out there and just smash a team like that. The experience they have being 3 times in a row European champions, you would just expect them to have that confidence, to have that skill, and just be superior, at least when you're playing at home. And yet they somehow managed to lose 4-1 at the Santiago Bernabeu. And it just kind of goes to show you, man, like this year, and it's kind of all stemming from the World Cup as well. Like literally any team can go on to do great things. It really does seem like it. And I'm going to go ahead and say this is the year of the comeback. All right? You look at last week. United were down against PSG, and it was looking like it was pretty much impossible for them to hit the comeback, considering like over 100 teams, or at least over 100 matches had been played, with nobody being able to achieve losing 2-0 at Old Trafford, or at home, and then winning the return leg, and moving on to the quarterfinals, or at least whatever the next round, at the other team's home team. It's just insane. Like, nobody expected that, myself included. I'm a United fan, have been for most of my life now, and I honestly, like, even my biggest optimistic mentality, I don't even know how to put it. Like, I could be as optimistic as possible, but honestly, I didn't expect us to move past Paris Saint-Germain after that result at Old Trafford, considering we pretty much got completely demolished. And let's just be real now. Like, apart from the first 20 minutes in which I believe we were the better team, we really didn't have a single chance to really do much in the first leg. So going into the second leg, I just kind of figured PSG are probably going to, score 1 early on us, kind of put us to bed, and then just kind of control the match from there. Maybe we'll beat us 2-1 or 2-2, and end it somewhat like that, but beat us pretty comfortably in aggregate. But until the very last minute, man, United, as always, showing that United spirit just does not go away. It does not matter. Of course, with a guy like Solskjaer and not a guy like Mourinho, who nobody likes and doesn't really instill belief in his players, at least not lately, and a guy like Louis van Gaal, who I guess he does kind of instill the belief. Like, we've seen him, like, with Haaland when he was managing them in the World Cup, and we've even seen him with Bayern Munich. They did pretty good things. But overall, it's like those weren't managers that had the United spirit. And Ole Gunnar, of course, he represents United. He is United to the bone. So it was always kind of, if it was going to be anybody that was going to be able to do it, it was going to be him. So I guess at the end of the day, you have to believe, you have to have faith, but I did not. I'm going to be completely honest with you guys. Like, I did not expect that to happen, and it did. And we moved on. And then, of course, on the same night, Porto hit a comeback and beat Rome. I think they lost 1-0 in the first match, and then, what was it? They won on penalties. I think it was like 4-3 on penalties. Managed to move on to the quarterfinals. A team like Porto, who, of course, I wouldn't say that they're necessarily underdogs against Rome, but I would say that after losing the first match, definitely nobody expected them to go on. But the Dragao is a phenomenal stadium. It's a great atmosphere, and anybody who gets them, they're going to have at least a tough match when it comes to the away leg. At home, I think just about anybody's going to kind of run through them. But yeah, I think that Porto are probably the team that everybody's going to want to go against. I would say even though of course Ajax did beat Real Madrid 4-1, I think that Ajax and Porto are probably still the two teams that everybody's going to be like, okay, if we can get them, then we have a pretty solid chance of making the semifinals. And if you make it to the semifinals, all bets are off. Anybody has a chance if they make it to the semifinals. So we'll see what happens in the draw there. But of course, we do kind of need to talk about the whole Zidane just signing with Real Madrid. But I think I'll talk about that a little bit later on. I forgot to mention that at the beginning of the episode, but I do want to talk about it as well because that's pretty damn important. If you think about the grand scheme of things when it comes to the sport, that's one of the biggest headlines to come out, except for probably Real Madrid being knocked out. Moving on to the matches tonight, I guess we could talk about yesterday and tonight as well. Of course, Juventus managed to hit one of the greatest comebacks and probably in their recent history against Atletico Madrid. And in the first leg, I wouldn't say that Juventus were hugely inferior, but they definitely got taught pretty badly by Atletico Madrid. Like, they really had a lesson of football there, and Diego Costa missed a wide open chance to really put the nail in the coffin, but that may have been still on when it was 1-0 or when it was 0-0 or 1-0. Diego Costa missed that big chance. I think they had a goal canceled as well for offsides, or maybe it was a foul by Morata, and I think they had a penalty that was given, and they kind of got that taken away as well. So you could argue that Atletico Madrid could have won 3-4, maybe even 5-0, depending on how things have gone with referees. I think that if there wasn't a VAR system, then they probably would have won 4 or 5-0 and Juventus would be out. But fortunately, and that's not because I'm a Juventus fan, because I'm not a Juventus fan. Let's be very clear about that. Unfortunately, the way it is now, I think is better because it kind of favors. It leaves a lot less, I guess you could say, arguments, because a lot less human error goes into it. And of course, the referee does have final say. But I think it kind of takes away all the controversy, or not all of it, because there's still controversy. Some things aren't given, some things are, and it's still kind of a mess. But at the end of the day, the least amount of controversy that there can be is better. Like if there's like I don't know, one controversial moment per game compared to 3 or 4, then that's a step in the right direction. And of course, stopping the flow of play, doing it for interruptions and stuff like that, it is kind of frustrating, but at the end of the day, I think it's probably a bit better because fans get less pissed off, and at least you would think they would. And of course, the players kind of know it's a different type of thing. Like, at least if it's offside, they're going to notice. If there's a handball, they're probably going to notice. And if there's something kind of dubious, like Kimpembe's handball in the box, which I believe that from the very beginning it was, because you can see his eyes are looking straight at the ball when it leaves. I think it was Andres Pereira's foot. No, it was it Diego Dalot? One or the other. You can see that he's clearly looking at the ball when the ball is struck. So it's clear that he is looking at it. But then, of course, there was the fact, like, he turns his back. So is he going to know, or is he purposely putting his hand out there? So it is kind of up to the referee's interpretation. But I think that as long as there's the opportunity for that type of stuff to be judged, seeing replays and stuff, I think it's gonna really help the sport in a pretty big way. So I like it. There's also some negative things to it, like I said, stopping the flow of play, and then, of course, the fact that it is still kind of a judgment call, but that's just the way it is. That's how it is in all sports. So I think it's a good thing. But of course, Juventus managed to hit the comeback in the second leg, and really early on, you can kind of tell that Atletico kind of went there with the wrong mentality. Now, I criticize Diego Simeone quite a bit because, listen, like, he gets results, and he gets the Champions League finals, for example. He won a La Liga. But at the same time, when it comes to matches like this, you have to be able to counterattack, because it's one thing to park the bus for 90 minutes against a team that's low level. Like, if you do it against a mid-table team, like, willing to park the bus and counterattack every once in a while, then you're probably going to steal at least a 1-0 draw, because they don't have the strikers to really get past players like Godin and Jimenez and Felipe Luis and Juan Fran, etc. But when you have a team like Juventus who have the greatest striker to ever live, and in my opinion, the greatest player to ever live, really, you have players like that, then you have, just some really, really good midfielders around them, good wingers. It's not like you're playing against a bum team. You're talking about one of the favorites to win the entire thing. And you got there and you completely parked the bus. Because there were plenty of moments where you could see, like, Griezmann had the ball. There was plenty of space in front of him. And instead of moving forward, he kind of just trotted backwards. Like, it's just, you could tell that the mentality there was not necessarily to go out there and try to get a result or even try to score. It was simply to not concede 2 goals or not concede 3 goals. And when you do that mentality for 90, or I guess in that case, let's see, it was like 2 or 3 minutes extra time. Stoppage time at the end of the first half, and there was 5 at the end of the second half. So you figure 98 to 100 minutes of stoppage time, or between regulation time and stoppage time, you're eventually going to concede goals. You have Cristiano Ronaldo to deal with, and he's eventually going to score goals. And I think the most shocking thing about it isn't necessarily the mentality, but it's the way that they conceded. Now, Godin, phenomenal in the air. Jimenez, very, very physical, strong defender. And yet, Cristiano Ronaldo managed to score 2 goals through headers, and of course, the other one was a penalty. That was just a big mistake by, who was it again? I can't remember who it was right there, but regardless, it's very, very stupid. It's just dumb mistakes. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. Like, Atletico Madrid just didn't go out there with the right mentality, and they played the wrong game, and Juventus, much to Allegri's credit, he went out there, much like he did against Real Madrid last season when they were down 3-0 in the first leg. They went with the right mentality, man. They win it, they gave it their all, and from the opening whistle, they just went for it. They went for it, and of course they had a goal annulled very early. I think it was like the 4th minute they had a goal taken away from them, which I think was completely justified because it was a foul on the keeper. So, it is what it is. Like, I was hoping for Atletico Madrid to move on just because I have a lot of Juventus friends, and only one in particular, Fabio, shout out to him, is very annoying, but all the other ones are we have friendly banter and all that. It's just fun and games, but he's a bit more frustrating. He's a bit more annoying, and it is what it is. I was kind of hoping that he would suffer because he always likes it when my United suffer. So, revanche, as the Brazilians would say, is a dish best served cold, and I would have hoped to see that, but I don't know. We'll see. Maybe we'll get the chance to knock him out ourselves and really make his ass cry. But we'll see what plays out, and of course we'll see what happens with the draw. On the same night, Man City destroyed Schalke 7-0, which isn't really surprising. I guess the amount of goals they put past them is kind of surprising because 7-0 in the Champions League, in the last 16 of the Champions League, it's never really that common. But Schalke has been a team that's lost I don't know how many games over the past few weeks, and they just haven't been on a run in a while. They didn't have any confidence, I would say. And then taking on arguably the most complete team in Europe, I would say, between, I guess, City, the only thing you can kind of say about them is that every once in a while they have defensive mistakes, but everybody kind of does that, and I think City are going to be very, very strong moving forward, and depending on which team they get in the quarterfinals, then they have a very, very good chance of going on to actually win the entire tournament, which would be a pretty big bummer for me, but at the end of the day, it is what it is. I say that quite a bit, and it is what it is. Like, if United don't win, then I don't really care who wins as long as it's not really Liverpool, and I would prefer City not to, but I'm not too worried about it if they do. Of course, I don't want them to, but I wouldn't kill anybody, I guess you could say. Even though I probably wouldn't even if Liverpool did, but I don't know. We'd have to see about that. But of course, City destroyed Schalke. No surprise there. Just a completely massive difference between the skill level of Schalke's players and, of course, City's. And moving forward, I guess we're going to have to see what happens to City. And when it comes to today's matches, there was Barcelona versus Lyon and Liverpool versus Bayern Munich. Now, coming into this, me and my friend Gabriele were talking, and I picked Liverpool to win 2-1, so hats off to me there. He picked Bayern Munich to manage to draw 2-2, but still, of course, Liverpool moving on. And then I'm finishing Liverpool 3-1, so I was pretty damn close, but I think it was kind of predictable, to be honest with you. Like, Bayern Munich are a good team. There's no doubt about that. If you look at their roster, they have a phenomenal lineup, but I just think there's something missing about them. Like, if you look at their team, of course, Lewandowski, still a phenomenal striker, one of the best players in the world, but alongside of him, who does he really have? Like, on the left tonight, Ribery was playing, and Ribery is good, but he's 35. No, Robben's 35. I think Ribery's like 33 or 34, so he's up there in age, and he's had some pretty bad injuries over the past few years. So it's not like we're talking about prime Ribery. Look at players near him. Goretzka was on the bench, which I think was kind of a mistake because Goretzka is a player that, when it comes to the final third, he's a lot more dangerous than, say, Javi Martinez, who's a defensive midfielder. And of course, Thiago Alcantara was playing. He's a very good player, but I don't think he's anywhere near what people expect him to be. Who else was playing? Of course, James Rodriguez is another player I think was extremely overrated. Like, he had a phenomenal World Cup in 2014, I think it was, where he scored some great goals with Colombia. He was playing very, very well, but I mean, he's a great player. Let's not get it twisted, but I think he's kind of overrated, and I don't really see him as the kind of player that's going to really carry a team to winning Champions Leagues or really carrying them to semifinals. And they got better. They got beaten by a better team. Like Liverpool, say what you want about them, and of course, Liverpool are my most hated team. Like, it's not even close. I mean, so I don't want to give them props, and I don't want to see them win. But realistically, man, you have to give them due credit. Like, they went out there against a team like Bayern Munich, who has the history. Of course, Liverpool have the history. They've won more Champions Leagues than Bayern Munich have. But you have to respect Bayern Munich because over the past 6-7 years, they've been in 2 Champions League finals, and they've consistently been around the quarterfinals, semifinals, and have consistently had great players, consistently had great managers. So they have to be respected, but they're an aging team who haven't been able to really attract the type of players that you would expect a club like Bayern Munich to attract. They're struggling in the Bundesliga. They're behind Dortmund, and they're just not the same type of Bayern Munich team that we've seen over the past few years. So Liverpool went out there. They were more dynamic. They were better on the counterattack. And I guess, quite frankly, Bayern Munich just weren't really able to create much. Even the goal they scored was an own goal by Matip, but I guess Lewandowski probably would have scored even if Matip hadn't touched it, but still, apart from that, they didn't really create a whole lot. There were a few chances here and there that Bayern could have possibly done a lot better with, but realistically, man, from the start to the finish, they were never really in control of either leg. Liverpool outplayed them in the first one. Liverpool outplayed them in the second one. So they deservedly move on. I think the most embarrassing thing of this match probably for Bayern Munich was the fact that they allowed Sadio Mane to score a header. And listen, he's a good jumper. He's got decent heading, but when you have Mats Hummels on the pitch, when you have Sule on the pitch, you don't expect a guy like Sadio Mane to be scoring over Mats Hummels. You just don't expect it. And hats off to Liverpool, man. They thoroughly deserved it, and they continue to confirm that they are a very dangerous team, not just home but also abroad. So we'll see what they do, man. They're a dangerous team. I think that right now, when it comes to the favorites, and of course we have to mention Barcelona, who smashed Lyon. I honestly, I turned it off at 5-1 because I wanted to come down here and record as soon as possible. But as far as I know, it finished 5-1. And I do want to give props to Lyon real fast because up until I think it was like the 65th, the 70th minute, they were still in it. They were still definitely in it. They were in for a chance. They were down 2-1, but I think that it just kind of became too much because if you look at the depth in Barcelona's team, it's just there's no comparison. Like once Lyon have to take off Memphis Depay, offensively there's really not much there. Like Bertrand Traore isn't a bad player. He's definitely a very talented one. He's a very physical player, and he's definitely pretty good. But realistically, there's just nobody really in there that is going to be very dangerous. And of course, it was a very beautiful goal scored by Lyon. But when you're facing Messi, Suarez, Coutinho, who I do think is overrated, but that's a story for a different day. When you're taking on players like that, Rakitic, and they're phenomenal defense, a great keeper. It's just not going to be enough. It's just not going to be enough when you have Lyon's roster. So 5-1, I think it was for Barcelona. Of course, there's 0-0 in the first match, but hats off to Lyon for putting in a great effort and sticking into it for as long as they could. But realistically, Barcelona's one of, if not the best team in Europe, and they're the favorites. I think they're the favorites. So from a point of view of a United fan, I think there's really 2 or 3 teams that we look at and we think, okay, we actually have a chance of beating these guys. Of course, Barcelona, we want to avoid. Juventus, I would say we want to avoid, even though I think we can beat them, as weird as that might sound because they have Cristiano Ronaldo. I just think that they are very beatable. They have weaknesses in that team. Atletico Madrid in the first match kind of exploited it and kind of showed how you can beat them, and I think that United do have the blueprint to do that because defensively we're relatively solid on our day. Right? If we don't play in open space, like if our midfield remains really close to and compact with our defenders, then we're very dangerous because we're not really going to concede many goals, and we are going to counterattack and be very dangerous there with Rashford, Martial, Lukaku, Lingard, etc. We're very dangerous on the counterattack. So that kind of favors the way we play against a team like Juventus, especially because if you look at the way they play, they're not necessarily like this. At least not when they're down. Like if they're down, then of course they're going to go after it as hard as they can. But their general style of play is very conservative. I think that kind of favors a team like United. I think that we can definitely beat them. I mean, of course, in the group stage, they won 1-0 at Old Trafford, and we won 2-1 at the Juventus Stadium. But realistically, man, that was a very different type of scenario because, of course, when we played them at the Juventus Stadium, or the Allianz Stadium, excuse me, they were already guaranteed to be first in the group, so it didn't really matter. When we played them at Old Trafford, and of course at the Juventus Stadium as well, but we, of course, still had Mourinho. So the belief around the club wasn't there. The players didn't want to play for him. And it was a very different United side. And, of course, Juventus, they tend to probably do better towards the end of the season, much like we do. So I think that if we meet in the quarterfinals, it'll be a very, very different scenario. It'll be a very different couple of matches, but who knows what happened there. But I definitely think that Barcelona, Juventus, those are the two teams that we want to avoid the most. Next tier, of course, I would say, well, also alongside City. I think those are the three teams that are probably the best in Europe right now, and those are the three most dangerous teams. Next tier below that, I think Liverpool, but realistically, I don't really think that we need to fear anybody. I would say like nobody really expects us to go past the quarterfinals, so there's no reason to fear anybody. I think we can play pretty much openly against any team out there. I just think that we have the worst chances of beating City, Barcelona, and Juventus. Those are probably the three teams that can put us the most under difficulty. But I think that if we face Liverpool, we can beat them. Like, we know for a fact we can beat them. They recently came to Old Trafford. They only got a 0-0. Of course, it wasn't the most entertaining match of all time. But realistically, man, we had 2 injuries in the first half, and they still weren't able to they weren't even able to score on us. So I think realistically, we can definitely beat Liverpool. We know that for a fact. And the 2 teams, but really the 3 teams that I really hope that we get are Porto, Ajax, and of course Tottenham. Ajax, very young team, very dangerous, very dynamic, very energetic. They're a very tough team to beat, but I think that we can beat them. Now, of course, you can say, well, they just smashed Real Madrid 4-1 at the Bernabeu, but this is a very weak Real Madrid team, not because the players are trash, but because the mentality around the club is trash. And I just believe that, much like with Mourinho at Old Trafford, I think people were kind of sick of not having Zidane. Like, when Zidane's there, you look up to him as one of the greatest players to ever live. When Solati's there, of course, you see him as a good player. Like, he was a very, very good player in his day. But he hasn't won what Zidane's won as a manager. He isn't Zidane. He's not one of the greatest players to ever live. Lopetegui, I don't think anybody ever respected him from the very beginning, so that was a disaster waiting to happen. Especially with all the controversy that happened over the summer with Spain firing him right before the World Cup. That just kind of fucked, I think, the flow for Real Madrid and, of course, for the Spanish national team who got knocked out in the group stage. No, it wasn't group stage. It was the first knockout round. So I mean, it was just a goat fuck for them, for Real Madrid, and I think that Ajax, I don't know. I think they're a pretty beatable team. They're very good, very young, but very beatable at the same time. Porto, I think, are by far the easiest team to beat in here because there's really nobody there that really worries you. I guess their best players are technically, Brahimi, who's a dangerous player but nothing special. Eder Militao isn't bad. Iker Casillas is, of course, one of the best keepers of his day, but I think he's older now, so I think he's not really somebody you have to worry about and look at as unbeatable. I just think that overall, from top to bottom, their lineup is nowhere near as good as ours, and I think that anybody who gets them are going to be very excited because they know that they just got the easiest draw in the entire last 8, or not last 8, excuse me. Last 8. So I think it's an easy draw for anybody, and of course Tottenham. I think that Tottenham, they're a team that anybody now can beat. On their day, of course, they can beat just about anybody. Like, realistically, like, they're a very dangerous team offensively with Harry Kane. They're very good, but I just think that man for man, we're better than them. I honestly think that we're better than them man for man. I do think that we're going to finish above them in the Premier League come the end of the season, and we've proven that quite a few times that we are better than them. I think we knocked them out of the FA Cup. I think last time we met in the Premier League, we also beat them. So I just think that we're a better team, man. We're a better team. You look at our lineup top to bottom compared to theirs, and I guess apart from Harry Kane, there's nobody in their roster that's better than anybody we have, except for, I guess you could say, Vertonghen, Alderweireld, and Davinson Sanchez. But that's, I don't know, but Tottenham still tend to make a lot of mistakes in defense too, so no worries there. I think that if we get one of those 3 teams, then we're probably going to move on to the semifinals, and then if we make it to the semifinals, who knows what happens. Literally anybody can get to the final if they make it to the semis. It's just a matter of hitting 2 good matches, and then from there it's just, whatever happens. So yeah, I think that moving forward, I would say, like I said, Barcelona and City, I think are the two best teams in Europe. But I think that you can't deny that Juventus, having Cristiano Ronaldo and having made it to two Champions League finals over the past 5 years, I think it is, they have the right mentality. They have the player to do it. And of course, Allegri, like him or hate him, I personally, I dislike his style, but I love his tactical abilities. Like, if you see mid matches, he makes some great, just phenomenal changes. And in this match in particular, he found the ways to exploit Atletico Madrid's weaknesses. So, of course, Diego Costa was out of that match, so I think that was a huge loss for them. I think that with Diego Costa on the team, you have a lot more heart, you have a lot more just courage, kind of, I guess you could say, because there isn't an inch of quit in that man, and he's just a nightmare to play against because he's physically strong, he's quick, he's an asshole, so he gets in your face and he kind of just builds up the spirit of the team. So I think that having a guy like Morata, who is the complete opposite, because he seems kind of lazy, he does dumb shit, his positioning is awful, his finishing is trash, his movement is okay, and his passing is good, but realistically, when you look at a striker, he doesn't really have the characteristics that you want as a guy who's going to lead you against a team like Real Madrid, against a team like Juventus. So I just think that Atletico Madrid, unfortunately for them, without Diego Costa, and they were just never going to win that match. I predicted them to lose the match, but to still managed to move on to the next round. But I don't know. I think that Juventus, having gotten that, they're going to have a lot of confidence. They're going to know that Ronaldo, he is the carry god that we all know he is. I just think that probably the semifinals are going to be Juventus, Real Madrid. I keep on saying Real Madrid. Juventus, Barcelona, Man City, and hopefully us. But if I'm being realistic, depending, of course, on what happens in the draw, I will say Liverpool. I think those are the four teams that are going to make it to the semifinals. But we'll see what happens in the draw. It's still early to say. Of course, Friday I'm going to do a podcast all about that. I'm also going to be talking about the UFC fights coming this weekend. Darren Till's going to be taking on Jorge Masvidal. It's going to be a very good one. Another couple fights that are interesting on that card as well. But I'll talk about that Friday. And moving on, I guess we can say, let's go ahead and talk about UFC Wichita. Now, this is a card that, for the most part, I think this might be the card I was least hyped about over the past, I don't know how many years. Like, Junior Santos is my favorite fighter. He has been forever. Ever since I started following the sport, he's the first main event I don't know if he's the first main event. He was with the first or second fight that I saw live. Main event, of course. Him versus Cain Velasquez 2. And I'm a huge fan of him. I love his personality. He's a great guy. He always has a smile on his face even when he loses. And overall, he's just a phenomenal fighter to watch. Like, when he's on his day, he is just a phenomenal fighter to watch. Like, his boxing is lit. I just said lit. That's kind of weird, but his boxing is great. His movement at times is great. His defense is pretty poor, but he has improved. Like, against Derrick Lewis, he kind of showed that he did kind of improve that a little bit. His chin is questionable, but it's still relatively solid. At heavyweight, realistically, anybody can get knocked out at any time. So your chin is only, I don't know. It's kind of hard to say, like, a heavyweight's chin is amazing. Like, realistically, he's going to get touched eventually. He's going to get knocked out. So as long as Junior can stay out of trouble or at least defend relatively well, then he's very dangerous to fight. And he can beat just about anybody on the right day. I don't know if he'll ever be a champion again, but he probably will fight for the title once again. I think that right now he's probably like one win away from fighting for the title, and that's mostly because DC only wants to fight Brock Lesnar, and Stipe is kind of avoiding a fight. Now, I would be kind of interested to see the trilogy between Junior and Stipe, because of course Junior won the first one. It was a very, very tough fight, but Junior did manage to pull it out. Miocic knocked him out, I think it was in the first round in the rematch, and the trilogy fight for let's see who's the number one contender could be interesting, but I think that right now they're probably trying to push Francis Ngannou a little bit higher to see if maybe he'll rematch Stipe, maybe he'll eventually fight for the belt, but I don't know if he's ready for a second title attempt. We'll see what happens, but Junior, of course, fighting against a guy like Derrick Lewis, it's a dangerous fight because technically there's just no matchup. Like, technically, Junior Santos is 50 levels above Derrick Lewis, but Derrick Lewis has never claimed to be a technical fighter. He's never claimed to have clean box. He's never claimed to be good on the ground. He's never really claimed to be a great fighter. But what he does have is a good chin and a big fucking right hand. He has that in his arsenal. So if he can connect with you once or twice, then you're probably going to sleep. Luckily for Junior, he did connect a couple times, but he wasn't able to hurt him in a very big way. Like, Junior even said himself, like, he got hit by a punch and realized that was a big shot. I don't want to get hit by that again. But Junior's smart enough, or he has enough experience, and he has kind of adapted his style moving forward after getting knocked out a few times. to being a bit more defensively intelligent and knowing when to get out, get in, when to get out, instead of kind of just standing there even when he's getting beat the shit out of him. And I think that he has shown improvements in his game. In this fight, I think really showed it. Now this is like his third win in a row. I do think he's one win away from probably being in a title shot, depending on what happens with DC, Stipe, John Jones possibly moving up, and Ngannou. Those are the kind of the 4 or 5 guys that are around the discussions for a title shot. Talking about the fight itself, Junior, he hurt Derrick Lewis with a really, really great kick in the first round. Derrick Lewis was kind of bending over, and I was just thinking to myself, is this guy playing possum? Because as soon as Junior got close, he threw this monster bomb. Luckily for Junior, it did connect, but it didn't connect in the right spot, I guess you could say. So Junior was I think it hurt him a little bit, but it was the amount of power that he was hit with, not necessarily the fact that it was landed on the right spot. And I don't think he was ever really in danger of getting knocked out, but that was definitely a moment where he realized, okay, Derrick Lewis, even when he's hurt, or at least he seems like he's hurt, he's still very dangerous. And of course, Derrick Lewis still did kind of stay in that kind of bent forward position and still threw some bombs. So either he has a lot of heart, and even though he's hurt, he throws as much leather as possible, or he was playing possum. I think he was maybe playing possum because the way he recovered in between rounds was pretty phenomenal. And Junior did say that, going into the fight, that he believed that the body shots were going to be a very, very important factor to that fight. And I guess technically Derrick Lewis recovered from the fact that he wasn't bent over anymore, and he seemed like he was back to his regular self. But he never really recovered because I think that shot kind of took a lot of stamina away from him. And Junior was targeting his stomach quite a bit with some great punches and some pretty solid kicks as well. So he did a great job, as well as some lead kicks. Let's not forget about that. Junior has developed some very, very solid lead kicks, and he was definitely diminishing some of Derrick Lewis's weapons. Like he likes to throw a front leg kind of jumping type of head kick. He likes to throw it a lot, and it's dangerous if it lands, but realistically, it's pretty easy to read because it's not that fast. It's quick, but it's not that fast, and he does kind of telegraph it quite a bit. And of course, he likes to throw haymakers and uppercuts. So as long as you can avoid that type of stuff, then he's not really that dangerous. And DC exposed him, and Junior kind of showed that he's just not on that level. He's not an elite heavyweight. And if he lands on you, then he's going to do some damage, but he's just not that elite. Like I think that a lot of people in that weight class can still beat him. Maybe not a lot, because heavyweight's pretty damn trash, but I think that Overeem, if he fights if he fights a smart fight, then I think Overeem can beat him. I definitely think that, of course, Stipe can beat him again. They've never fought, but I think Stipe can beat him. I think DC destroys him every time. I think Junior destroys him every time. Ngannou, I think that if they fight again, destroys him. So yeah, I just think that towards the top of the division, he's making money and all, and I'm happy for him. But I just think that if you look at it, he's not really on par with the top guys. I'd kind of like to see him fight Cain Velasquez if Cain does eventually come back, because, of course, Lewis is a very similar fighter to Ngannou in the sense that he's got nothing but power. But I think that Ngannou is a bit scarier. If Ngannou touches you, you're done. If Derrick Lewis touches you, then there's a pretty solid chance that you're still going to survive, at least for 3 or 4 more. And if Cain does come back and it is relatively close to what we used to see, of course, that does seem very unlikely now, considering his last fight. But if he can reach that level, then I think he makes pretty easy work of Derrick Lewis. But I don't know. I like Derrick Lewis as a human being. I love his Instagram. If you don't follow him, definitely check it out. He's one of the funniest people on that entire platform. I enjoy him a lot, and I'm really happy he's making a lot of money. But is he realistically a legit title contender? No. Is Junior? On his day, yes. If he makes dumb decisions, then probably not. But I don't know. I have a lot of faith in Junior. He's, like I say, he's my favorite fighter, and I think if he fights smart, he can beat just about anybody. Will he beat a guy like DC? I don't think so. I definitely don't think so. Can he beat Brock Lesnar if Brock Lesnar somehow managed to win the title? Yes. Can he beat Stipe? Probably not, but it's possible. He has done it before. That was a less experienced Stipe, probably less confident Stipe, and that was a different Junior Dos Santos. He'd been through a lot less wars, but I think he still has it in him to at least get a title shot. Moving on to Captain Marvel. I'm not going to talk too much about this because I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that haven't seen the movie yet. I do want to go ahead and say, I'm not a political guy. I don't really give a shit about politics, and I don't give a shit about people basing their opinions on a movie based on the actress being a feminist or kind of saying things anti-white guys. I don't give a shit about any of that stuff. I literally could not care less. I make fun of the stuff a lot of times. I make some sexist jokes and stuff like that here and there, but at the end of the day, man, it's all just jokes for me. Like, I don't really give a shit. Like, I'm all for equality and all that type of stuff, and I don't really care. Like, if she's making fun of white guys, who cares? Who cares? I mean, it is what it is. And besides, like, when you're gonna judge a movie, you don't judge the movie on the actor's personal life, unless they're like a pedophile or a rapist or something like that. Then yeah, fuck them. But if you're gonna judge people based on their political views, yeah, I just think that's kind of fucked up. But going into this movie, of course, it had a lot of bad publicity because of the things that she said, and of course, it's a female-based movie with a female lead actress, and they make her extremely powerful. So a lot of people are complaining about feminism and stuff like that, and I'm not a feminist type of guy. I don't believe in any of that, in the majority of that shit. Like, of course, women probably should get equal pay, and there are certain things like porn stars. Female porn stars make a shit ton more than male porn stars. So I'm not going to talk too much about politics apart from the things I've already said, because I'm not that informed, to be honest with you. Like, what's the point of talking about something that you don't care about and something that you don't really know much about? So moving on to the movie itself, of course, it came in, like I said, with a lot of criticism about her political views, about it being a feminist kind of movie, them putting down, I don't know, like males and stuff like that. And honestly, like, I didn't see any of that in the movie. Like, of course, the lead actress, the lead character, the main protagonist is Captain Marvel, whatever you want to call her, and she's a woman. That's pretty much the extent of the feminism in it. I guess you could kind of say that a lot of the music is, legendary, or at the very least popular. How can I put it? It's popular music that involves women singing. I guess you can kind of put it like that. Like, there's a lot of women singing in the song, and that's perfectly fine because it's about a woman in the late 80s, or I guess that's kind of, yeah, that movie took place in 1989, if I'm not mistaken. So it makes perfect sense. Like, it's kind of like Black Panther and what it did for African Americans. I guess you could just say black culture in general. It's kind of like they tried to do the same thing with Captain Marvel, and that's perfectly fine. Look at Black Panther. It almost won an Oscar. At least it was in contention for some stuff. So you have to give them credit for that. And they tried to do the same thing, hit or miss. I would say it's not necessarily a huge hit, but I definitely wouldn't say it's a miss. Like, the movie in general, from start to finish, is entertaining. I would say there's a lot of plot holes in it, and I'm not going to go too much into it. I will say a few things, like, that's kind of a spoiler, so I'm not going to go too much into it. I think there's definitely a lot of plot holes in it. There's some weird things that kind of have implications for Endgame and what happened in Infinity War. So I don't necessarily know what is canon or what's mistakes, I guess you could say, and what kind of really goes against what happened in Infinity War and what's going to happen in Endgame. But there's a few confusing things in there that I would definitely like to see some explanations of, involving the Tesseract and stuff like that. I guess it's kind of a spoiler, but not really. I think everybody kind of expected this movie to have some pretty major hints at what goes down in the world and what goes down in the MCU. So no really big spoilers there, but I just think that in general, like, the movie from start to, if you're looking for entertainment, then the movie's very solid. Like, there's good fight scenes in it. She's of course extremely powerful. She's kind of like Superman in the sense that nothing that you really face that's not basically God isn't going to be anywhere near your level. Like, Superman, I think that a lot of people complain that he's this unstoppable being, that he's so much more powerful than anybody else, like in the Justice League and stuff like that. But if you look at his villains, he doesn't fight humans. He doesn't even fight, relatively strong aliens. He fights basically nothing but gods and people that are on his level. The biggest issue, I think, with this movie, and that's something that a lot of people have been pointing out to, is there's really nobody in this movie that you think can actually beat Captain Marvel. Whether it's, I'm not going to spoil, because that's kind of a plot twist and stuff like that, and whether it's the main villain or some of the people that she fights early on, the Skrull and stuff like that, there's really no threat to her. You never really feel like she's in danger, and that's kind of something that takes away from a movie. Like, if you're talking about an action movie, even if it's like a hero movie, look at some of the best. Like, you look at Batman, whether it's any of the Batmans under Christopher Nolan, even, of course, especially Bane, who breaks Batman's back, spoiler alert, or you even look at Iron Man. Like, in the first one, he's having to learn how to be Iron Man. The second one, of course, he's against a much bigger threat, and then, of course, Iron Man 3, he's against somebody who has kind of similar tech and is able to use a lot. He's a great scientist in his own right. So There's danger in Iron Man. There's, of course, danger in Captain America Civil War because everybody's fighting against each other. Of course, in Spider-Man Homecoming, there's danger because Vulture's, he's got insane tech and he's been using it for a lot longer than Peter Parker's been using his powers. So it's just in general, like all those movies, most of the good superhero movies, they always have a villain or villains in some cases that you really perceive as a threat. And this movie doesn't really have that. It just doesn't. So that's kind of the biggest issue with the movie, alongside some plot holes that I'm not necessarily going to go and spoil because they are towards the end of the movie. I think that the biggest plot holes are. And there's kind of one thing that I want to mention. Like, there's one point in the movie where Come As You Are, of course, by one of the greatest bands of all time, Nirvana, pops on. And that movie, that song came out in the early 90s. And the movie takes place in 1989. So I'm kind of wondering how that song fits with the movie. And I get it. It's based around the 80s and 90s, but the movie's in 1989. So, yeah, I don't think she knows that song. Or at least, wait, no, maybe the movie takes place a little bit later. I know for the fact that at least the damn. Anyway, whatever. Like, that kind of confused me a little bit because realistically, there's no way she'd heard that song unless they were playing on the radio in Har, or her Har. I can't remember what the name of the planet was, and I do want to say one little thing here that's kind of got me and my friend Marco, who I watched it with, giggling pretty early on in the movie. Now, there's a moment early on where she gets captured, all right, and she's it's like within the first 10-15 minutes of the movie, so this isn't a spoiler. She's hanging from her ankles, from her bare feet. All right, now bear with me. Everything else that she's wearing is covered. Like, they don't take anything off of her armor or her suit except for her boots. There's only two reasons that's possible. Number one, maybe like the boots were problematic in terms of hanging her upside down from. Or number two, which I think is probably the more likely one, the damn Skrull have a foot fetish. Like, probably have a universal foot fetish. Now, you've heard of worshiping feet, but I think these motherfuckers actually worship feet. Worship them toes. So I don't want to know what happened there. I kind of do actually want to know what happened there. Cause it's like, it would kind of make the Skrull a lot more interesting. Because, like, why the hell do they worship feet as a god? So, I don't know. Me and my friend kind of just both noticed that. And we thought it was hilarious. And it was just kind of weird. Now, I don't know if that's actually a thing. I'm sure that there's probably some kind of weird explanation for it. But none that I can really think of. And, of course, I don't know. It was just kind of weird, but that's kind of all I have to say about Captain Marvel, because I'm not a movie critic. I'm not even like a huge movie guy. I go watch, I don't know, 2, maybe 3 movies at most at the movie theater a year. I probably went, 5 or 6, maybe even more, probably like 8 or 9 years without actually going to the movie theater. Last year I saw Infinity War. I saw Deadpool. This year I saw Glass with my dad in Manchester. Then I saw Captain Marvel right now, or the other day. So I don't see a lot of movies. I'm not a huge movie guy, like I said. Even when they're out on TV and stuff, I'm not generally watching them. I'm more of a TV show guy and video game guy. But I did kind of want to give my short little breakdown of the movie. Like I said, man, if you're looking for entertainment, then this movie is definitely very good. The fighting scenes are good. It's just it's interesting because, of course, it's a look back at kind of the starting point. It's kind of like an origin story, not just for Captain Marvel, but also for Nick Fury. So it's very interesting to see their relationship there and how they develop. And there are a few little moments there that are very disappointing. Like, this isn't necessarily a spoiler, but it actually kind of is. So Nick Fury, he loses his eye in kind of a shitty way. Like, it was never really explained by my understanding in the comics either. So the way that it was, it's kind of shit. But I mean, who really cares? Just him losing his eye, and they probably could have made it something cooler. But at the end of the day, I don't know. He's still Nick Fury. He's still a badass, and he's still Samuel L. Jackson. So no complaints on my part. So I would say that if I had to give a movie a rating from 1 to 10, I would say it's a solid 6 or 7. Like, I wouldn't say it's better than it's definitely not better than a 7. And just in terms of entertainment, I would say it's a 7. But the plot holes and some of the weirdness to it, things that I just don't really understand, I would say it leads it towards a 6. I'm not going to give any 6.5 or 6.8. None of that bullshit. It's either a 6 or a 7. So I'll just go ahead and put it as a 7. It's a good movie. It's a fun movie to watch. But if you're looking for something that's going to really blow your way in terms of story or in terms of just character development and stuff like that, then don't expect a whole lot. But it's definitely a decent movie to watch, and I look forward to seeing what they do with her in Endgame. I'm just really hoping, and this isn't really a spoiler because everybody knows how powerful she is. I'm really hoping she doesn't just show up out of the blue and beat the shit out of Thanos. If that happens, that's really going to be a shame. We saw what happened in Justice League when Superman out of the blue just shows up and pretty much dominates and makes everybody else look stupid. And if that happens here, then I think that's going to be a very, very big mistake by Marvel, because they saw what happened with Superman. So making that mistake is just kind of stupid and kind of make them insane. But that's kind of my final thoughts, and hopefully you guys did enjoy this podcast. And as I mentioned at the end of every episode, I'm still very new to this. This is only my third solo podcast. I do have another podcast with my friend Thomas. We talk all things Mortal Kombat, but that's with a partner. That's with two people. We kind of bounce our opinions off of each other, and it's pretty hard for me because I'm not used to it to talk 45 minutes to an hour and a half all by myself without, I don't know, just kind of losing it a little bit. Not like losing myself, like going insane, but losing the flow and keeping the energy up. It's not that easy. And I have to say, man, I have the utmost respect for guys like Bill Burr who do that every single week, twice a week. And of course, he's a phenomenal comedian, one of the best of all time. But I have so much respect for him to be able to do that. And it's a work in progress for me, of course. Hopefully, I will get improved over time as time goes on. And hopefully, you guys will be sticking around to check it out. So thank you so much to anybody who listened to the very beginning, or even especially to anybody who got to the very end. So if you're noticing this, let me know in the comments, or just hit me up on Instagram or Twitter, whatever. I'm there, and all the links will be in the description down below. Thank you so much for guys for listening. Definitely check out my Mortal Kombat podcast. I think the next one I'm actually going to be doing all on my own, because Thomas, unfortunately, is going through some injuries right now, and he's in a lot of pain, so he's not really feeling like talking about Mortal Kombat. And he will be back probably next week, but I will be doing one on my own in the next couple of days. And, of course, definitely check out some of the podcast is going to be coming out Friday or Saturday, talking about the Champions League draw, and, of course, what happens at the preview for UFC London between Darren Till and Jorge Masvidal. So as always, guys, thank you so much for listening. I'll see you in the next episode.